hard time or no time, just remember, it's a thin line. Hello, welcome everyone to It's a Thin Line. I'm Teacher Will, Minion William, or one of the many other names that people call me. I'm here today with my good friend, Boss Man Leon. How you doing today, Boss Man?
I'm doing good, Will. How's everything going?
Everything's going good. I'm happy to get our first podcast out and look forward to telling our stories and talking about our friendship and just where life has taken us and some of the people we've, mutually known and known exclusively. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I invite everybody to join us. We hope to put out at least three a week, but let's see how it gets started. But this episode, what we're going to focus on is just introducing ourselves and give you all out there a little taste of our story and what our story is all about. So, to start off, let's talk a little bit about ourselves. So, Boss Man, how about you start off with where were you born?
I was born in Orange County, California, but near LA in the early 70s. So I'm a little old, I'm an older cat.
Okay. I'm kind of right there with you. Born in 78. I was born in well, according to my birth, well, I don't even have a birth certificate, but according to the book where my birth is recorded, I was born in Antigua Cuscatlan in El Salvador, Central America. When I
Yes.
was
Say that again.
in El Salvador, Central America, I was born
Accused Cucualan.
Antigua Cuscatlan. Yeah, my Spanish is lacking, but we'll get into that as well. I was born in what I now know because I've actually driven past the school. I was born in a girls' school. It was a Catholic, ran by Catholic nuns, and it's highly suspected that one of those girl students was my birth mother. Long story short, I was adopted at 6 months old. I landed in LAX, I think on February 21st, 1979, right about when the Salvadorian Civil War was getting started. And so that's where I was born in San Salvador, well, in El Salvador, Central America, near San Salvador. So, all right, boss man, where did you grow up? Talk a little bit about where you were as a small kid, uh, high school years a little bit, and your young adulthood.
Well, I grew up in San Diego. Most of my younger life, between 3 and 10 years old, downtown area. They called it Little Italy. It's still called Little Italy, but back then, the funny thing was it was called Paisa Town because Paisas were all from Mexico or Latin America. And I loved it growing up there. A lot of the neighborhood knew each other. We had a community garden. I lived there till I was about 10. Then I moved out to Logan Heights, lived in Logan Heights till I was about uh, 15, 16. Um, but the funny thing was, living in the hood, they would bus us out to the white neighborhoods out in Pacific Beach.
Oh, okay. So
So,
you were part of one of those busing programs.
exactly, they called it the VEEP program. So
Okay.
they had to get us minorities out into the white community schools so they can get funding, which was cool by me. I didn't want to
Yeah.
go to the school in the hood because the school in the neighborhood, honestly, Memorial was like a prison. It had 30-foot fences, uh, securities at the door. It was literally like a prison. You had one way in, you had one way out. So I didn't mind that. And then from there, my parents actually tried to buy a home there. And Mexicans older, they don't know about buying real estate. My dad got robbed about $20,000. So we had to literally get up and move. And we actually moved to a very nice neighborhood in Mission Hills, which is upper middle class, low, high. My dad was working with a gentleman who owned some apartments, and I lived there till I had my first son at about 19. My
Okay.
mom, my mom still lives in that same house. It's been 42 years. and she's still there, which is awesome. But from there, we went to Chula Vista. So I grew up in Chula Vista in the later part of my life with my sons, and you know, I moved around a little bit here and there, but most of the time, it was low income areas.
Okay.
I wasn't rich or by any means. We were, beans and rice and tortillas and weenies.
All right.
Our hot dogs were weenies with tortillas and ketchup.
All right. All right. All right. Yeah, I can I can understand that. All right. So I grew up in, if you could draw a line from the South Bay in Northern California to about San Francisco, over to Carson City, Nevada, and then right back down to the South Bay. That's about the area I grew up in. And in my early years, from age 6 months to 11, Morgan Hill, San Jose area. My grandfather lived in San Francisco, spent a lot of time with him. My grandmother in Carson City, spent a lot of time with her in the summertime. Um, and then at about 11 years old, well, off to the system. I had some problems, some problems in maybe in my head a little bit. So my father did the best that he could. He was really looking to try to get me some help, try to, help me, because, he's a good man. Good. My father is a good man. And the insurance and things like that. As soon as insurance ran out, I was okay to go home. So my father really wanted the best for me. So I ended up in the children's shelter. I ended up in group home after group home. I believe back then, kids in group homes who were there because of other reasons other than criminal were called like 600s. And then probations were called like 300, something like that. I definitely could be wrong. So somewhere, I committed petty crimes. I think the first time I went to juvenile hall, I was like 12 years old for stealing food because I ran away from a group home and I was
What
hungry.
the hell?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
but no, I think I was about 12. And then we'll get into this later, but I had some kind of knack for breaking into houses and things like that. And um, most of my crimes were always petty, theft crimes. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize them, but I'm just saying theft crimes. So somewhere in those years, I got switched over to probation. So I spent a little bit time in juvenile hall, and then I finished out with group homes at 18. I aged out. I spent about 3 months on the street, 3 or 4 months on the streets. Not really on the street. I was sleeping in friends' houses, on the floor and stuff like that. And then at age 18, I got a new address at a wonderful city with a bay view called San Quentin. So yeah, so that's basically how I spent my childhood, and through my teenage years, and then all the way up to when I turned 18, became an adult. I entered the gates of San Quentin. To finish things up a little bit quickly, how did you come to work at the place where we met?
Uh, it's a crazy story. When I got to junior college, when I had my son young, I was an auto mechanic. I was doing clutches and transmissions, and I was making a lot of money. But um, I got hurt one time, and my baby's mama at that time was finishing up her GED, and I picked her up from school one day, and her counselor was this old OG homie. And for those who don't know, an OG homie is an individual who grew up in the barrio of gangs. He looked at me and he was like, "Hey, son, how are you?" And I said, "I'm doing good." And he was like, "What are you doing here? Can I help you?" And I was like, "I'm here to pick up my girl." So he talked to me, and he was like, "So did you finish high school?" I said, "No, I dropped out." He's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I have one class left." I said, "Fuck it, whatever." And he says, "Well, why don't you finish?" I said, "I make good money, man." I said, "I probably make more money than you do." But I had a I had a flywheel fall on my arm. So I had some bandages pretty bad up, stitched up. And he's like, "Well, wow, you're getting hurt pretty bad. And you're only what, 19, 20?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Is that the kind of career you want?" So he talked to me for a while, encouraged me to go back to school. So I went back on my GED. and I wanted to become a teacher.
Okay.
Wanted to,
Yeah, that
you
sounds
know,
good.
I was like, you know what, easy job, tell kids what to do, tell them to shut the hell up,
Yeah.
teach them some life, easy
Yeah.
peasy. Well, got my associates in um, education, general ed with an emphasis in education. Um, and when I was going to get ready to transfer, I decided to be a math teacher. So I started taking pre-algebra, trigonometry, calculus, pre-calculus, and then I got as high as linear algebra. And at the time, I had my second son already. My ex caught cancer. So I had to make a decision to hurry up and graduate so I could make some good money. And I decided to go criminal justice. With the criminal justice, I could graduate within 2 years with a bachelor's in criminal justice, but it was an emphasis in criminal justice administration. I figured it was more policy, administrations of policy reform, policy reform, because we know the criminal justice system's all jacked up.
Yeah,
And I
most for sure.
and I figured, you know what, if I can make a difference, why not? So I went to San Diego State, and in 2 years, I graduated with honors, got my bachelor's degree, criminal justice administration. And at San Diego State, there was a professor who did a prison tour that we went from level threes all the way up to Pelican Bay. And we visited 10 prisons, and I paid $1,500 out of pocket. It was 9 days. It was the scariest, most impressive experience of my life where I learned what prisons were really about.
Okay.
And that's something I can go into later deeply, but I learned, I already knew the gang culture. I already knew gang life, not because I was a gangbanger, but because I had so much family and friends involved in all that. Because
Yeah.
drug dealing and gangs, that wasn't my thing.
Hmm.
That was not my thing. I thought it was retarded, but I had to be around it because of family. You can't turn away from family.
Hmm.
So I graduated from San Diego State, and one thing led to another. At the time, my wife got a job about a year after she graduated from San Diego State at the prison, and
Okay.
I was working at the Hyatt Regency, doing security there, and I was making pretty good money. Uh, I was working graveyard, so because of my degree, I helped the security director run a lot of the paperwork, and uh, I because I'm a big guy. I could describe myself in another episode, but I'm a pretty big guy, as you know. So I would do a lot of personal bodyguards for I did for Bob Hope, LL Cool J, Boys to Men, John Elway, um, Super Bowl. We had Super Bowl here. So that was why I got paid so much money, because I had martial arts training. I had a lot of self-defense training. Um, but after about a year of her working at the facility, she encouraged me to apply. But I already knew what prison was like. I went to Tracy, California Men's Colony. I
Yeah.
went to Central California Women's Facility. I went to San Quentin. San Quentin, holy crap. Old Folsom, New Folsom. Pelican Bay, we didn't make it in the door because they went, that was in 97 when they killed that first
Oh
Sureño on the
man.
yard. So we didn't make it in. We were at the gate and they turned us away because they were on full lockdown and they didn't want to take any risk of a hostage situation. So because my ex-wife had cancer, I decided to go into criminal justice, and I thought I was going to be in hell. But when I got there, yeah, my first week was crazy. We had the first they say it's a suicide, but I don't think it was a suicide in A unit. I don't know if you were there already, but
What year was that?
uh 2013. No, 2003. 2003. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2003 is when I started.
Wow, I had no idea until this moment right now that
Mhm.
you and I literally walked into that prison in the same year.
Really?
Yes, I went in there. I went in there in July 2000, 2003.
I started August 16, 2003.
Wow. Wow, I had no idea. Wow.
We were
Okay.
lifers. So that's how I got into
Okay.
working in the correctional system.
All right. Well, I went, I was in the pen back in Bush years. Um, so immigration was a whole lot different. So back in those days, if you went through, reception, if they figured out that you weren't born in the United States for whatever reason. I mean, in my case, they literally asked me, where were you born? And I told them El Salvador. And, that was enough, but they would have figured it out eventually. So back then they placed a immigration hold on you. Um,
So what if you would have said I was born in Bakersfield or where you were up north?
maybe, I don't know if they would have ran my fingerprints back then. I don't
Uh,
know. Maybe. I often thought about that. Dude, why didn't you just say you were born right here in San Francisco? I mean, nobody would have known the difference. But I guess eventually maybe they would have put two and two together. Or
right.
in the case what I've come to see now so many years later is that people, they get released, and then under Obama for some reason, ICE goes and snatch them up. So they had been released, living on the street for 5 years, started a family, rehabilitated, and then ICE comes and says, "Hey, by the way, you got to get the heck out of here." So it's good that it ended like this. I mean, that it happened like this. I'm not really too bitter about that. So back then, if you had an immigration hold about 1 month before release, before parole date, you were transferred down to Donovan. This was a little bit sticky for me, and we'll get into it a little bit later. We'll talk about that whole thing a little bit later. But long story short, I went down to Donovan. And the interesting thing about Donovan that I'll never forget is Donovan is at the bottom of the hill, and the
Yep.
prison that I was headed to is right at the top of the hill. So you can literally walk the yard, which is what I did. And I walked that yard, and I knew that in just a few weeks, I could look up and see my new home. I mean, that was a state of mind that I look back on now. I mean, back then I didn't think anything of it, but it's like, man, I was literally sitting in one prison for like a month of my life, looking at the very next prison that I was going to go to. And I had no idea that I was going to be there for 5 years. My parole date came, and they woke me up bright and early. Everybody I was with was happy. I mean, they were about to get their gate money and get on a bus and go home, see their loved ones. I can't say I felt bad, because I honestly didn't feel too bad, because I already knew what was coming. I mean, when I say, I can't tell you what the immigration officers look like. I can tell you I remember them cuffing me up. And I can say that I honestly, like a foolish, naive, stupid, foolish person, I thought, okay, I'm going to another prison, but things are going to be a little bit different, better probably, because for the first time in a long time, these guys cuffed me in front.
Mm.
I was wearing regular clothes. I had a bag full of property because, and that's the another thing, we'll talk about this later, is everybody who was paroling looked at me kind of funny because I had a bag of property and I was with the parolees getting let loose, but I knew I was going to another prison. So in my mind, I didn't think I was going free at any point. So I'm like, dude, I'm just transferring to another system. I'm just transferring to another prison. So I held on. I kept my Bible. I had my book.
So hold on, Jess.
Yeah.
So were these guys, ICE was there to pick you up, but they were being released to the street?
Yeah, the regular parolees, we were all paroling. I was just quote unquote paroling into the custody of immigration.
But these guys didn't have no restraints on.
No, they were going home. They were parolees. They were not coming with me. ICE came just there to get me. But what I'm trying to say is they called us all out because technically we were all quote unquote paroling. It's
Right.
just they got to parole to the real world and I got to parole to the immigration. So yeah, they came, snatched me up, cuffed me up, put me in a van, rolled me through the gates. And I do believe that I met your ex-wife on the first date. I do believe she was working that shift. Yeah, because I mean, back then, no disrespect, back then your wife wasn't, nothing bad to look at. So I was like, hey, who's this lady?
Ex-wife.
Ex-wife, sorry, ex-wife, my bad. I apologize, boss man. So that was back then, a long time ago. So, anyways, yeah, and I refused to answer to the last name Alfaro, and got pissed off. And I think that fat guy was there too. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yes,
because they
sir.
got upset. They came and were like, "Are you Alfaro?" No, my name's Mustanich. So, all right, man.
Oh,
Well, I think everybody's gotten a little bit of taste of who we are and a little bit of what our story is.
let me add something if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I just want whoever's going to be listening to this to understand that my goal is to keep it real, keep it raw, keep it uncut. We're going to edit whatever we need to do. However, if you hear me like a smoking, I'm vaping, I'm drinking my Gatorade, I might be having my drink as I do these interviews. I like to keep it real. I want my listeners to gain something from a man who is going to keep it uncut and real and tell you stories of what happened, of course, to the best of my ability. And the reason I'm going to say this is because just so everyone understands the law, per federal law, the relationship that me and this individual have, Teacher William, started after 2 years of him being released from immigration back to El Salvador. Because per federal law, a federal officer or pretty much almost any officer cannot have any contact with an ex detainee inmate who's been incarcerated. That is the law. After 2 years, they don't care. Of course, they do, but they're not going to say that. So I want individuals to know that I loved what I do, what I did, and this individual that you're going to find out this relationship that developed as a friend, as a brother to me. It was something unique. It was something that took years to cultivate, of an inmate and an officer brought together by a world that is just full of evil, full of hate, full of jealousy. It is everything that is evil brought together in one area. I salute all law enforcement who do these jobs because they're the one, it's the quiet, thankless job that they do. Now, I will say too, I have a lot of respect for inmates because it's not easy to be taken away from your families. And most of them understand they're doing their time for something that they did. And they take it, most of them take it as grown ass men and do their time as to what they do. Most people think that most officers are just assholes, that we don't give a shit, but that is far from the truth. Yes, there are a few bad apples, but I just want my listeners to know that myself, Big Boss Man, and Teacher William, we're going to keep it real, we're going to keep it raw, and we're going to tell you our experiences so that you can hopefully envision and be there with us while we talk about what we did and what happened.
All right.
Cool.
Most assuredly, most assuredly. And I look forward to this journey. I look forward to telling our story. I'm glad we got them legal disclaimers out there. Boss man was on me before we started this. Hey, man, we got to say this. We got to make sure it's very clear. And it's true. And we will get into it. But yeah, about 2 years after living here, I got a message on Facebook and it was surprised me. But it helped me, and we'll get into this a lot later, and it changed my life for real. There you go, guys. I'm Teacher William. This is Boss Man Leon, two unlikely friends who have some stories to tell you guys. And until next time, show some love, stay safe, and always remember, guys, it's a thin line.
Peace.
TBL Productions.